Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Wednesday Wham with Silverline, the home of the wonderful Trumps, which is now available in previews, and you can get it in your comic stores, I believe, in February. So we are now going to the comic book stores. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a fantastic series, 4-issue mini, and it's wonderful. We're also the home of such comics as Cat and Mouse, which is a fantastic romp in New Orleans. We got Wolf Hunter, which I colored, and it looks spectacular. It's a wonderful spy mystery set in World War II. And Barb Talberg, who is not here with us today, she did Divinity, which is a wonderful story about a girl who has healing powers and is being chased around. And then we also got books like Kalis, which is the ultimate dad comic, and it is fantastic. I am telling you, this is a great, great book. So, yes, and then also John Middick, who is one of our co-hosts. He also does Sniper and Rook, and our venerable artist who is with us, Rob Davis, does Twilight Grim, amongst other books.
And another mystery project coming up sometime in 2024.
Yeah, so, and tonight we are honored to have the wonderful guest of Jerry Bingham. As far as I understand it, you have done Batman, you have done Marvel books, you have done DC books, you've probably done other books, you did your own book, Beowulf, which was beautiful. I had to go look some of your stuff up.
Research.
and then he stretched out from comics into doing wonderful, fantastic, and we might show you some of those pictures, Cowboys and Indians paintings or Western paintings. What would you call them?
Whatever you want to call it. I do
whatever you want to call
Western,
them.
sometimes I do Eastern, so I call it this.
Okay. Depends on which way you face, right?
They are wonderful paintings. Very, very, very imaginative and very, very wonderful. So those are cool. So we might take a look at some of those, and maybe we will also pull up some of your other comic work over time, just to take a look at see where you came from and what you've done. Why don't you give us a quick?
Me because I kind of block all that out.
I don't blame you.
So Jerry, for benefit, because this is the first time I'm meeting you, can you just kind of give us a little bit of a backgrounder as to who you are and what you've done and where you're coming from and where you're going, maybe?
How long do we got?
Well, we've got at least an hour.
We're dying from you.
So the floor is yours for the most part. So if you just talk, we'll just listen.
Okay. Well, I was very little. I was like 2 years old, and then I got to 3. I got out of the military, and I got work at Marvel Comics first. And,
you got out of the military at 3. Wow.
Yeah, 3. Yeah, you didn't want me to cover all those years. So when I finally started getting work as a professional artist, or wanting to be, got work at Marvel, and my first project, I think, my first regular series character was Black Panther. I did for a number of issues after Jack Kirby left the book. So that was my intro. I was petrified trying to take over Jack Kirby's book, and after that, I bounced from book to book a lot while I was there. My next memorable stay was on Iron Man, and then I went from Iron Man. I bounced around Marvel 2-in-1, Marvel Team Up, and worked on most of those characters there at one point or another. The original characters.
Right.
I went over to DC and started getting work from them, and did a lot of covers for them, and I did some Batman stuff, and I guess I made my name over there. Batman. I did the artwork for Son of the Demon, the graphic novel.
Okay. Yeah, that's where I remember seeing your work and admiring it. Probably a good question is, are you self-taught? Did you go to school? How did you gain your artistic skills?
Well, you start out self-taught,
Right.
I was 10 years old, I think, when I got my first Jack Kirby comic book, and fell in love for the first time. And so, but my teachers are every magazine, every book cover that I picked up. My mother used to buy movie soundtrack albums, and had the artwork from Howard Turpning and Frank McCarthy and these guys who went on to be great Western artists. So I got that at an early age.
Wow. Okay.
And by the time I got out of high school, I went a year to the American Academy of Art downtown Chicago.
Okay.
And I kind of screwed off the whole time. It was I wasted all that. I worked all summer.
Young people, young men.
And I went down there because first time out of the house, away from home, and I'm going downtown, and
got to sow some wild oats, right?
Well, I got in with the wrong kind of friend who just made me laugh the whole time I was in. I was an idiot for the entire year. So. Yeah, I didn't do all my assignments. Anyhow, when that came to an end, that's when I decided I couldn't afford another year of this, and I went into the military. So 4 years, and then I got out.
Okay.
Then I got out and wandered around New York until I.
So you got a little bit of professional training there. Even if it's just by osmosis, you probably got a little bit of.
Well, like I say, I can't. Any artist who says he's self-taught, he's probably. Jasper Johns or somebody ridiculous, but
born with a paintbrush in his hand,
or a bucket and a spray can and just throw stuff on the canvas. I mean, nobody is self-taught if they have any skills, in my opinion. They either got it from school or they got it from studying masters and studying a lot of the artwork. So, the list is too long for me to name all the guys I was influenced by.
Right.
So
I was kind of influenced by Kirby myself, buying a comic of his to get into this crazy biz. So I sympathize.
Yeah. Well, like I said on one of the other programs there at Silverline, I mean, the great part about when I was growing up with comic books and trying to teach myself how to draw, the best part about Marvel at the time was, even though they had a house style, they had all these disparate talents there. They had, from Jack Kirby to Gene Colan to everybody had their own style. They were all coming from someplace else other than comic books, and they didn't learn from other comic book artists. They learned from illustrators. They learned from other places, and so they each brought different skills to their comic books. And so all that to say that when I was starting out, laying in my bedroom floor looking at all the comic books I had spread in front of me, there were all these Ross Andrew, all these guys looked completely different. And so I never really, after a while, I found John Buscema, and that's all I ever wanted to be. But up until that point, all those different influences made me an individual, for better or for worse.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I also used to say that while having all those influences and all that different direction, while it probably made me a better artist in the long run, it probably held my career back quite a bit. And just in retrospect, I think about other artists who came in and they were keyed in on one style and one artist, and they were able to make a name for themselves a lot faster than me, who kept changing I kept changing my style and just evolving. I was desperate to evolve because I never cared for my own work that much. So I was always looking for something else to pick up and try to run with.
Yeah, I think that's probably a personal wise, that's a better way to go than to just kind of you get in a rut and you stay in it.
Yeah.
Whereas you have more potential to grow if you're finding different avenues to go in.
I think so. I mean, there were a lot of these guys who I thought were much better than I was at the time when I was starting out in comics. But I look at some of them now, and many of them haven't really evolved much past those days. They're still doing the same stuff they were doing then, and I couldn't do that. Even though, like I said, I've never been a fan of my own work, but I was always trying to push other buttons, and so that's
a very interesting statement. You're not a fan of your own work.
No. Especially
get what he
while I
means.
was doing comics, I hated my own work. I was always
Oh
frustrated.
wow.
I was always frustrated that I couldn't be better.
Okay, so then when you transition into your more Western kind of stuff, do you like your Western art?
That was many years later, and to be honest, while I have my own paintings on my walls, it's only because I can't afford to buy original art from anyone else.
I'm exactly the same. As you can see behind me there, there's that's one of mine.
Oh, yeah.
So
No,
Whereas
I don't want to
print
be
stuff
overly,
out.
I don't want to be I don't want to come out as overly humble. I do have
right.
but
Well,
I do see good in some of my work, my paintings, but I can't stare at it for too long because I always find something that I wish I'd
You
done
find the flaws
differently.
But have you ever left one of your pieces, either comic or otherwise, and then you come back to it and you go, oh, that was actually pretty good, or you like, who did this, and then you realize it's yourself?
Well, not quite that, but I do look back on. I do come across that situation where I looking through the piles of artwork, thousands of drawings and paintings and designs I've done over the years. I do occasionally see one and say, that's not that bad. I never say that's great because I don't see any of it. I'm my own worst critic, as the popular phrase.
I think most artists are that way. I think what we see in our heads isn't always what gets onto the page. It gets filtered through your hand, and then by the time it gets to the page, you're going, that's not what was in here. It's close, but it's not quite. Yeah.
Most of Norman Rockwell's early career and mid-career, he was trying to be J.C. Leyendecker. I mean,
right.
So if you don't have something to reach up for, you wind up stagnating, and it's. I was always afraid of that, I guess. That's why I was always trying something new. I took while I was working at Marvel, I did some very crude paintings, but I got work doing paperback covers for Pinnacle Books, and not a lot. Maybe a dozen or so, but it stretched me that way. And I had a friend of mine. He was a good friend, and he taught me how to take my own photographs, black and white photographs, and I got a model and when I needed one, and so that helped me quite a bit, because even though it's so totally different from what the comic book drawing, you're studying how the folds in clothing really work,
right?
And how the shadows create patterns and textures and folds of their own, and I don't know how better to say that. I'm supposed to be a writer now, right? But I don't know. The words, as I'm, I think about the words easier than I can come out and just converse with people. I spend too much time in isolation.
Yeah. So I found this. Is this your work?
Yeah, that's one of my first. Like I said, Black Panther was one of my first characters there at Marvel. That was. If you don't want to,
definitely
you want to know how much that splash page went for. I sold that.
How much did it go for?
I sold that page back shortly after we started doing conventions, and I maybe got $150 for it or something.
Back then, that's not bad though.
When a Black Panther movie came out, the recent one, I saw it for auction at Heritage Auction House, and it was well over $10,000. I don't know.
Wow! Get out!
Yeah.
So that's it. That's a fantastic piece.
Yeah,
so just so you know, it's really, it's got a lot of punch to it.
Yeah.
It's really well done.
Yeah, I see there's some.
It's fairly simple. I got my circular composition in there. I was always working on geometric compositions at the time. It was something that Dan Atkins taught me. He was my mentor. He kind of helped me get into the business, and so he introduced me to a lot of other artists that I never knew, and he started showing me things that I hadn't learned on my own. So
he
give him a lot.
Wally Wood, didn't he?
What's that?
I'm trying to remember. He worked with Wally Wood, if I recall.
Yeah, he was Wally Wood's assistant. So
right. Yeah.
Worked on some of the EC stuff with Wood and the war stuff. He used. I don't know. I can't say anything for a fact, but he used to point out, he did a lot of those airplanes in the Wally Wood, war comics, and so. But Dan is a talent. He's one of the best inkers in the business by the time he finished up there.
So how old are you when you were following in Jack Kirby's footsteps here?
Oh, right there. Let's see. I got out of the military. I was maybe 22 or 23 when I started on the Black Panther.
Wow.
Yeah, that's young.
Wow. So yeah, wow.
Yeah,
so they take. No. They're sticking you behind. And how old would Kirby have been at this point?
Oh, I don't know. I only met him once, and it was kind of at a distance. When I did the Beowulf graphic novel, I got the award for best graphic album, and I was on stage with, I think it was the artist for Rocketeer, man. The names just slipped my mind.
Dave Stevens.
Dave Stevens. And
yeah.
Jack Kirby was on stage getting a special award. So
wow.
That's the closest I ever got to him. I never even got to talk to him. I would have loved to.
Yeah. So speaking of your Beowulf, that's fantastic work.
Thank you.
Just like it's
something.
Were you trying to channel Prince Valiant, or were you just?
I had never really inked with a quill pen, except very, very briefly. So I was learning how to ink for myself at the time, and I was a fan. When I was a younger guy. After high school, I kind of got into the sword and sorcery, and my mom got me to read The Lord of the Rings, which I've read like 3 times, the entire syllabus. Just because I was such a fan of that stuff, and at the time, it was all John Buscema's Conan, Frank Frazetta's Conan covers, and I was so into that stuff, and Schwarzenegger just did the movie. And in my mind, I wanted to do something on my own, but I wanted to show the fans where all this stuff started. And it started with Beowulf. That's where Tolkien teaches Beowulf. Yeah, he hasn't taught for a while. Tolkien taught Beowulf in university, and he was an expert on it. Mythologies, of course. So that's where his meeting with Smaug happened, the thief in the night, and all that. That's from Beowulf, and so a lot of little elements taken from that. And I was such a huge fan, and I wanted to be John Buscema drawing Conan is what I wanted to do, but I never got the chance. And so when it came to doing something on my own, the other thing was I was penciling a lot of work, but I really never had it. I don't want to say never. I didn't have too many inkers that I was crazy about inking me. And consequently, bouncing from book to book, inker to inker, I didn't have a recognizable style of any kind. In my mind, this is me in retrospect, thinking back on my early career. And so that's when I decided I had to do something on my own. And I picked up Beowulf. And I went to 3 different libraries, got 4 different copies of the Beowulf poem, and took them home and read them all, and tried to distill it down. It's huge. It's a huge piece. I tried to distill it down to what was it, 40 pages, 44 pages or something for that graphic novel. So that's where it came from. My love of sword and sorcery, mythology. I mean, one of the things about those early Stan Lee comics is, we talk about the goofy Shakespeareisms that Stan created for Thor, the Thor comics. But his Thor comics got me interested in mythology, and it made me pick up the LaRousse Encyclopedia of Mythology and other books and read those and study. I was in high school. I was studying mythologies from everywhere from ancient Egypt to Norse mythology to, the Americas, everything. And I was hooked on that stuff. And so that's where Beowulf comes from. My love of the material. So.
Yeah, so this page here that we got up on the screen, this is awesome. This is just beautiful work. Thanks. So yeah.
I probably, when I was working on it, when you mentioned Prince Valiant, I had Hal Foster on my desk, as well as John Buscema, Frank Frazetta, and I had built myself a big drawing table out of giant sheet particle board and 2x4s nailed together. It wasn't even adjustable. So
wow.
And so I have a whole photo of it somewhere. But I had all these different artists pinned or tacked to my board and books and everything. NCYF. I had everything up there, and I was constantly not trying to swipe, but I'm sure some of it came through. And a lot of the inking, because I hadn't really inked much for myself, I was taking ink style from everyone from Jean Giraud to I found Victor de la Fuente and fell in love with his work, and the European comic illustrators at the time, Palacios and
Zafino? No, Sergio. I don't know. There's a guy named Zafino, I think. I'm not sure.
Jorge Zafino.
Yeah.
I was in love with his work. It was just brilliant stuff.
Yeah, you can see maybe some of that happening here in the Cape.
That might have been that.
Would you add a little bit of Barry Windsor Smith at the?
No, I wasn't really looking at Smith stuff at the time, to be honest. It was
okay.
Like for the inking, it was mostly the Europeans.
Okay, yeah.
There was a Western artist, McCoy. It was the name of the cowboy. The names, names are getting fuzzy the older I get, the further I get away from this stuff. Yeah.
So
I often said my inking style at the time after Beowulf, it was a combination of Jean Giraud, Mobius, Dick Giordano, because he was inking a lot of the Neil Adams stuff, and did you do all the art in this book? So you penciled, inked, and colored. You colored it as well. Yeah, I did.
And did you color
everything except the lettering? The lettering was done by Ken Bruzenak, that came from the first comics people.
So the coloring, did you do watercolors, or is that washes with ink, or?
I don't know. You're too young to know the process at the time. There were blue lines, and are you familiar?
I was getting into understanding how comics work right when the blue line started going out.
Okay.
So I did the research into understanding how that process worked.
Yeah.
But it was like I was in that middle of the transition stage. So I started.
But that's what it is. They make the way they shot onto these. They were actually fairly thick boards to handle the watercolor, and they take the black plate. They expose it with a chemical onto the board in order to create a blue line image of the black line that you see.
Right. And then you color the blue lines.
And so the problem with working that way was that you gave a transparency with the black line on it. And so that's where the register marks there.
Yeah.
You see along the top and the sides.
Right.
And if they ever got out of alignment.
Right. Well, you line up the black transparency onto the blue line, because after you start painting, that blue line starts disappearing a lot of the time. And so you have to keep flipping that sheet up and down to make sure that everything is still in alignment. It was a bit of a hassle, but I was able to.
Yeah, and it sounds like the board was too thick to put on a light table even.
Well, yeah.
You wouldn't be able to get as thick. The paper wouldn't allow light to go through, so you could put it on.
And even if it was standard thickness paper, with some of the more delicate line work, you might have gotten lost, and so I mean, it was a process that worked for a lot of people a lot of time. That's how I did the Batman graphic novel too, The Son of the Demon. It was painted on blue line. So
this is interesting because you did this in circa 1984.
That's when it came out. I did the I did the black and white work.
But you're doing
I started studying the Beowulf and getting the story together, and then started penciling it. I probably penciled it around 1981, and took me a year to ink the thing, and then shopping it around, and nobody wanted to, first I took the Marvel and I took the DC and got turned down about everywhere, except I met the guy from First Comics at a convention at one point. I think this is how it happened. It's a long time ago. but I talked him into it, and basically I had to make a deal. I had to draw half a dozen issues of Warp because they lost their penciler who was doing the Warp comic books at the time. So they agreed to publish the graphic novel if I did so many issues of Warp.
Wow.
Wow.
So it was probably and then it probably took me at least 8 months to paint the thing.
Yeah.
It was a long project. But,
yeah. So now here's an interesting thing though. So this is 1984, and you used watercolors. And that would have been for comics, that would have been a stretch, or you would have been pushing boundaries doing that.
Well, yeah, I wasn't the only one doing it, of course, but for me, it was pushing boundaries.
Yeah.
I knew about Dr. Martin's dyes, and that's what I used on it. Are you familiar with Dr. Martin's dyes? Yeah. And one of the things I didn't know for a few years after, when it was too late, where they're very light sensitive, and those dyes start disappearing.
Yeah,
if they're not under
UV light heats them. Yes.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
All right. Do we want to take a look at a couple of your other
whatever you want to do? That's something I just did on my own when I wasn't even published at the time. I wanted to get work drawing going on. So this was
here we go.
Probably living downstairs of Dan Atkins, and I was trying to do samples. He actually took me into New York and helped me show my samples around to the editors. And
wow,
I look at this stuff and I cringe though.
Now
here's something I like. The one with the knife. I like that one. It was
yeah.
I thought it was inventive at the time. I thought I did a decent job making it. I'd been inking for quite a while at this point. So
reminiscent of Jim Aparo.
Well, I love Jim's work. I studied more Neil Adams, but
yeah, it's got a little bit of both. Yeah,
at that point I was maybe kind of a cross between Senna and Adams, and maybe that comes across as looking somewhat like Aparo. There you go. You got the Dr. Martin.
I have an old bottle. It's all dried up, but
I've got some of those someplace.
Yeah, it's got nothing in it anymore, but
yeah,
as you can see. But yeah, I've still got the bottle. That's what they did comic book coloring with way back.
You're old enough you can remember those things. Right.
Yeah, just a little.
So like I said, I was doing research into coloring comics, so I knew about the Dr. Martin's dyes, and I was about to go out and get them and start doing the coloring process, because I learned all about you got to have the RGB, Y, or whatever, and all of the different coatings. And so I had started learning that process, and then computers came out, and I was like, oh, I don't need to do any of that.
Well, I didn't have to do any of that either, because when you're painting with physical paints, you didn't have to do coding. So
it's like, So is this one of your covers?
Yes, it is. It was not a triptych, it was a quadtych. There were 4 different comic book covers. There was Suicide Squad, there was Detective, there was oh God, don't ask me.
Okay.
But the backgrounds, because the Millennium series, the story's connected. And so I made these right. There's
another one. Yeah,
so if you put these covers up in the right order, those trees and everything, they continue on.
Oh, they all connect.
They all connect.
Interesting.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
That's
Nice.
cool.
That was fun.
That's very cool. Awesome.
Yeah. Captain Adam, that was one, I think. Yeah.
So were you living in New York at the time when you started, and that's how you got your work with Marvel? And
well, no, actually, I was when I got out of the service, my ex-wife, my first wife, her family was from South Jersey, and so I would take bus trips up to New York City and get rejected and go back and forth until it was Marie Severin was the art director there, and maybe she got tired of me coming in there, but eventually she said, she knew this guy over in New Jersey, and had I ever heard of Dan Atkins, and she told me how to find him, and I went to his place, and he took me in, and he set up a second drawing table in his living room, and he let me stay on his couch for a week, and I drew, and he told me what I was doing wrong a lot of times, or most of the time. But by the end of that week, he took me into New York and introduced me to Archie Goodwin and the editors at both Marvel and DC. As well as continuity. He introduced me to Neil Adams, but Neil looked at my stuff and said, "Yeah, well, you got a ways to go yet. Good luck."
Yeah, that's Neil. He was brutal.
Well, at the time it's crushing, but I look back at my stuff then and I think to myself, I wouldn't have hired me. But this was the stuff you're looking at here, this detective cover. That was quite a few years later. I started at Marvel in 79, I believe, or 78, 79. And then this was probably this was about the time I was doing the Batman graphic novel. So it was in the mid 80s almost. Yeah. I had already moved to California at this point. I was getting a little work in Hollywood here and there. And I was and then I got the Batman graphic novel was underway. I got the script from Mike, and I was barreling away on that one. But they kept giving me covers to do as well. So somebody up there liked my work. So this was all around this was about 1980. Oh gosh, it was after Beowulf. It was 86 or so.
I'm trying to see if there's any dates here. It looks like it says January.
January 84? 88.
88. Okay. Well, so that would have been after the Batman graphic novel, because that was in 87. That was, I believe.
Yeah, you did the
work.
Yeah, it was printed. Yeah, it's the cover date is January 88.
Yeah.
It looks like. And then, so which means it was actually published in 87, late in 87. Yeah.
So I was working 10 years in the business when I did this cover.
All right. So now, hopefully this is not too much of a segue. So you're doing art, and you doing your stuff, and you did Beowulf. So you did the entirety of Beowulf, and you wrote it as well, I assume.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
so
I wrote it. I took translations of it. I didn't,
Okay. Well, okay. So, but you transcribed your version of it. Right. When did you start doing some writing of your own, of writing comics of your own, or start doing prose or anything in that?
Well, I've been writing since high school.
Oh, okay.
English was my favorite subject. English and history were my two favorite subjects, and so it was because of my comic books. And while I was trying to learn to draw, I was trying to learn to write at the same time. So I've been writing almost all my life. I just haven't gotten published that much because I was making money as an artist, and I didn't have time. I didn't have the time to do both. And I was, after the Beowulf, I had done I'd done a couple comic books. I've written a couple comic books. And in 1995, I had a short story published in an anthology book. It was an anthology book called Superheroes, even though the story I did wasn't about a superhero. And when I took the assignment, it wasn't about superheroes, but they wound up naming it. And I got some guy on Goodreads got all upset and the story isn't about superheroes. And I, of course, you don't have the chance to say, yeah, but that wasn't the name of the book when I took the job. Anyhow, but that was my first published short story, 95, I believe. And from there, I tell people I can't remember a day when I wasn't writing something, even though very little got published. But I had like 10 years of Writer's Digest magazines stacked in a closet. And I took writing courses at UCLA when I was in California. And so screenwriting courses. And I tried to do that for a long time, but couldn't get through the slush piles because, they're pretty deep. And then I probably, before this new book that just came out, I probably have a half a dozen screenplays on my hard drive, as well as maybe a dozen novels, most of them pretty lousy looking back at them, but it's all the learning process. It's Ray Bradbury said, you write a lot of words before you actually get published.
So when you say screenplays, have any of them been actually produced?
No, they're
just okay.
Stuff that I was trying to get,
Have any of them been optioned?
No.
Okay.
Have they been looked at by producers at all?
They probably never got past the readers.
Yeah. Okay.
Screenwriting is, the process goes, you send it in, and you either send it into an agent, and it goes to their readers, and they sift through to find the best ones, and there's this giant pile next to their bedroom.
Right.
And then, or else
so then can they become comics?
They can, I imagine. I actually tried to turn one of them into a comic, but I wind up working on it in the extreme. I had like 70 some pages, and I realized you're not even halfway through the story, and so I wound up putting it down and walking away. But one of my failings is people worry about writer's block, and I hear a lot about writer's block. That was never my problem. My problem is my brain is too divergent. I'm working on one thing, and I can step away from it for a minute and write something on a notepad, and before I know it, I'm into that story. And so I have a lot of stories completed, but they were never polished to the point that they became good enough, because I was always on to the next thing. And so that was a headache for me for a long time, just trying to find a path and stay on it. And like I said, I could finish all these things, but I couldn't pull it all together until most recently. So
what
I actually had a YA novel that I did. It was fairly long. This was back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I had a manager, a business manager from Hollywood, look at it, and he got back to me, and he said he was interested in it, and he said, "But can you turn it into like chapter books, like Lemony Snicket?" And I said, "This is a large novel, and it would take me years to chop it up and turn it into anything of, these short stories like Lemony Snicket, So I kept running into things like that in my career that I did. You don't know why it happens, and maybe I just didn't do enough research ahead of time, or something happens where it just throws you off, and you just start doing something else.
Yeah, rug gets yanked out from under you. Yep.
Yeah. So I've been writing all my life. That's just the long way of saying I've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah. So what pulled you into these Western or cowboys and Indians kind of paintings?
Well, I was, aside from anything else, I said I was into the mythology, but I also had an early interest in history, and a lot of my reading, even now, I would say maybe 40% of my reading is nonfiction. And so that when I was after comics, I got into film, and I worked in film as an artist, art director, whatever. Film, I theme parks for a while. I did that for about 20 years. And as I started getting fed up with that business and my life in that, I said, I have to have some place to go. And I was always painting this stuff because my interest in history and the illustrators that I grew up in love with, Howard Turpin, Frank McCarthy, all these guys who they had their work. I saw their work first in National Geographic or in publications elsewhere. My mother always bought National Geographic even after I left the house. That was one of her Christmas presents to me, was a year subscription to National Geographic. And so I saw these artists in there, and I naturally tried to emulate them. And so when it came time to walk away from the illustration world and try to make myself a gallery artist, it was just a natural segue for me. My favorite artist was Howard Turpin. Frank McCarthy was a close second. And so that's what got here.
So how much reference do you get for these? And like, do you get people to pose for you, or do you just kind of make it up? Or
well, I grab it from everywhere. I go out and I go to reenact. I used to go to Civil War reenactments and, you know, take photos of the guys on horseback or sitting in camp or whatever, and then I would do the same thing elsewhere. And I had a friend of mine when I was in California who was a professional photographer, but he also went out and, you know, he gave me hundreds of pictures of. His name's Kimball Hall. He gave me hundreds of photographs of his friends who owned horses and would go out there riding. And so, and then when I'm working on a piece, I generally have several different photographs. I go through my morgue, my files, to find the subject matter, not only the subject matter I need, but to make sure the light source is as exact as I can get it. So when I'm putting different people in a frame or on a canvas, or a guy in a horse or whatever, I got to make sure that light has all got one source. So it's a bit of artistic world building, I guess, where I construct these things. That scenery right there, that was old Tucson. Outside of the town of Tucson, there's a place that was an old movie studios called Old Tucson, but it was around since the early days of Western film. And hundreds of movies that were shot on this lot. Mm-hmm. And movies, commercials, TV shows, Gary Cooper and John Wayne, El Dorado. It was all shot in this location, in this back lot here. Not a back lot, it's a huge lot. I don't know how many acres it is, but they have the whole town built there. And this is basically a little train station you're using in the background. And I was there, standing there at one point, and this old guy was giving mule rides to the kids. And this is what it was. He was coming at me crossing this bridge, and I took a bunch of pictures of him. And but then, as the artist in me, I gotta compose it too, right? So I've got that with the one side with that fence going in there. So that's why I put the water on the other side, but leading into the picture to create your perspective there. And then I realized as I'm painting it, I should have worked on the composition a little bit earlier, but as I was painting it, it struck me wrong that the guy leading the horse leading the mule was that far away from it. And so I went through a lot of photos to look for a dog to put in there to add some interest between the two figures. So that's why I say this is like a world building thing where I'm taking bits and pieces from all kinds of sources, mashing them together to try to make a full composition. So
wonderful. These are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful works.
Thanks.
So yeah. So we've hinted at you have a new project that you have coming out, or is it already out, or is it coming out?
It's on Amazon right now as we speak.
It's on Amazon. So
both ebook and paperback.
So we're going to do a little bit of a tie-in with Silverline, because Silverline lives in the world of New Orleans and Louisiana.
Okay.
In the South, and your book seems to be set there, or has some stories set in that area.
My detective is in New Orleans.
Right. And so what's the name of your book? What's you give us the rundown.
I have mouse pads now. Here's a mouse pad.
All right. Hades Kiss.
Yeah, there it is. And here's the book. Oh, this is the author. This is not an author's copy. This is actually a proof because it's got, you see that band across the front. But you see, it's a pretty big book. Close to 500 pages.
Wow.
So that's it.
So did you self-publish or?
Yeah, I had to self-publish it. And,
okay.
I started. Well, I don't know if you've read anything about it. It's a novel in stories, which means it started out as a short story that I wrote, and then I liked the character so much I wrote other short stories with him, and I couldn't get a magazine to pick them up, so I wrote stories to connect them, and so I have it's 6 short stories, 3 novelettes, and 2 novellas, and they're put together in such a way that they're not all chronological, but they all tell the story of this detective and the young lady who he takes in and makes an apprentice. And there's each one of these stories is a different mystery, or suspense story or thriller. They don't follow the same formula, and I did that on purpose because I was a good friend who read it said that it's a love story to all the famous, all my favorite authors from the past. There's a story in there that I was inspired by Poe. He was the first mystery writer, or the first detective writer, private detective. And there's the tribute to Conan Doyle. The Conan Doyle story was actually the first short story that I wrote with this guy. And I wrote it because I was Sherlock Holmes fan all my life, or since I could remember. It's Basil Rathbone. My mom get me up in the middle of the night so I could watch the late movie with Basil Rathbone. So and then she gave me her Sherlock Holmes collection when I was in high school. So I've been in love with that guy, for most of my life. And so this is how the whole thing started. This is the impetus for me. I wanted to write a Sherlock Holmes story, but not make him Sherlock. So I deliberately made him someplace as far from London as I could, New Orleans. He eventually, his Watson character is this young woman who he finds living on the street. She's a Russian immigrant who stowed away to come to New Orleans, and got there just as a hurricane was bearing down, and she wound up living down there by the crashed boat docks. And so he finds her while he's out looking for the lost dog, and then she helps him out, and he decides to give her a job, and he takes her in, and they kind of grow together throughout these 11 stories. And,
all right.
So yeah. So it's New Orleans. As he spends some time in the swamp. He spends the Falaise swamp, and he goes all over Louisiana, but most of the stories take place around there.
So how did you go about doing the research for this book? Did you actually go running around Louisiana yourself, or did you? Or did you just do a lot of reading on the net?
I've never been.
You've never been.
I've never been. But this new technology we got.
Yeah.
There are people who walk around cities with a camera, a film camera on a stick, and just film themselves walking, and they narrate, and they give the history of what they're walking by.
Yeah.
I watched a number of these guys, and I discovered things that I could have never known otherwise.
Yep.
And then
I've seen some of those videos. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when I'm writing about certain locales, I always have Google Maps pulled up next to my story that I'm writing. So I make sure that if he gets on a tram here in one place, he gets off at another, I got to make sure that tram is going that way.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So everything is really heavily researched, and books and you name it. I've been there trying to. Just to make sure that I got my facts straight, because if you don't get something right, somebody's going to call you on it.
Absolutely.
I mean, I have to know which ward is which ward, as New Orleans is split up into wards, right?
Yeah.
So if you got to get it right.
With comics, you can fudge it a little bit, but when you do it writing, yeah, if unless you decide to make a alternate world, you definitely have to be fairly accurate, or otherwise you're gonna get raked over the coals.
Yeah, well, things it doesn't really occur to you until you look it up. That's why I wound up looking up everything, is because things that didn't occur to me, like, I thought the Mississippi ran a particular direction, but through New Orleans, it snakes. And so if you're in one part of the city and you're along that river, you got to know if you're looking into the sunset or your back is to the sunset. So all these things, it helps your descriptions, but if you get it wrong, like I said, somebody's going to call you on it.
So now, would there be any interest in moving this into a graphic novel or into some sort of comic book series or something?
No, I don't think so. I think that my illustration days are in my past. When I walked away from it, it's hard for me to go back at any point in my life. When I was starting out in comics, that's all I ever wanted to do with my life, and draw comic books. And then I get in there, and then it becomes a job, and you get a bit jaded. And I started doing the paintings for the paperback covers, but I couldn't really, I wasn't really very good, and so I was having a struggling there. And so back to doing my own graphic novel, and then I moved across country to get working in Hollywood because I saw the end of my comic book career ahead of me. Back then and now as well, your life as a comic book artist, maybe not so limited because you have independent comics now, but back when I was doing them, there were like 3 companies. And so I always saw the end coming for me, the end of my career coming for me in comics. New editors come along, and they like hiring their own age group, and people artists who've been around for a long time. Styles change, artistic styles change, and you wind up feeling left out a little bit more and more. So that's when I decided, okay, going to California, I'm going to get into movies. And fortunately, I was able to do it. I did a lot of storyboarding, but I went to UCLA for production design. Never got to be a production designer, but I learned a lot. And when I came out of there, I did some prop designs and makeup designs for Wes Craven and other directors, and then a lot of storyboards. And when I, at the same time, I was in between jobs for too long, and then I got lucky. I got a job working for Walt Disney Imagineering, working on theme park stuff. But that was kind of, it was 3 years of hell, basically. It was a mixed bag, because the mixed bag was, I probably learned more in a short period of time than I ever would have anywhere else, because you're in a trench and you're taking fire every day. You got to turn out at the speed of light. So turn out. And so I was art director of attractions. At one point, I was working on 28 different attractions simultaneously.
Oh my God!
And so and everyone had a different theme. Every one of them had a different artistic design to it. And I had other artists working with me, and I was directing some of them. But for the most part, I had 2 drawing tables in my little cubicle, and I usually had 2 paintings going at the same time, going one from the other, as well as during sketches, preliminaries for other pieces. So and then because Disney is like the largest Shark Tank in the world, everybody's always trying to cut your legs out from under you.
Somebody's gunning for you.
I was making a lot of money, and there were producers there who resented that, and there were a couple young artists who thought they could do my job even though they couldn't. So, but everybody's trying. Not everybody, but there's always a little gang of people that are trying to undermine you, even as an art director. So at some point, it was, I left after 2 years. Actually, I got canned. At some point, the attractions for this facility, they were in the process of being built, and the art and the high concept stuff was being finished, and they really didn't need a high priced artist in there. And so they let me go. I went across the street, and it was still working for Disney, but I got work on California Adventure and Animal Kingdom on a couple other places. So
are you located in California now?
No. I guess this is, you got me on a tangent, and I'm really bad at tangents because I can go in a direction for hours and not know where I'm headed. But so, that was me saying that every time I changed jobs, changed professions, it was impossible for me to go back to something I was previously working on. So
right.
Like going back to high school.
What's that?
Be like going back to high school.
Well, yeah, kind of. Even though comics was my first love, and in my mind, even today, I'm thinking, wouldn't it be cool if I could, but at my age, it's like, how many years you got left to draw comic books? Because a comic book is going to take you a long dang time.
Well, but part of it is also maybe wrapping your head around how to think about it and say, well, can I punch these out in a short way or in a fast way or so you produce your book. Your book is a bunch of short stories that ended up compiling into a large story.
Yeah.
So can you do the same with comics?
No, well, I can't, because in my mind, I have to be working on the next book.
Right. Interesting.
Well, as I was saying, when I changed, every time I changed artistic professions, I couldn't go backwards because I was always pushing and pushing whatever direction I was heading in. And going back to something I was doing earlier would be like walking back down the escalator that's going up. So, and then so when I decided to do the gallery stuff, doing my Western art, whatever, that was my new direction. And once I was in that, I couldn't go back and do the film work anymore. So that's when I left film. And once I was out of film for a few years and I was making an okay living doing my painting, that's when I decided I didn't have to be in Los Angeles anymore because I was only there for the work. I lived in the same house for 25 years. I mean, when I sold it, I made out okay because I'd been in that house for so long. But when time came to actually leave illustration, then I started looking around for where am I going to go? I'm going to leave Los Angeles. I always hated Los Angeles. It was there for work. And so I was I spent 5 years on Zillow, watching the housing prices. And I became, earlier in my life, I lived with a realtor. So I was pretty good at following the market and being able to suss out where the potential was to make money in real estate. So,
so where has that landed you now?
Well, it landed me in Arkansas.
Arkansas. All right.
I'm in Missouri. So you're south.
I finally moved in 2020. COVID. It was in the middle of COVID, and my father.
What a time to move! Oh wow!
My father had built his house in Arkansas. It's a beautiful house. It's on a lake in the woods, in a gated community, and so he had been dead for a couple of years, and my stepmother had been living here, but she couldn't stay here anymore, and so the house was going to be empty. And that's when I said, 2020, the housing market was crazy across the country. Everybody was fleeing California and moving to all these desirable places. So housing prices were skyrocketing. And I had the option to buy this house from the family at a decent price. And why not? I came out here as a trial, really. I didn't really know that I would like it that much. It's kind of fairly isolated. However,
talk about a change from LA.
Well, yeah, it is a culture shock.
Yeah, definitely.
But being here, when I got here, the people They were nice.
Mhm.
I spent 30 years in Los Angeles or more, and I wasn't used to that.
Yeah.
You know, I told this, I said this on Facebook not too long ago because the anniversary had come up, and when I moved into this house, it was 2020 COVID time, and because of the COVID and because of everybody fleeing California, I couldn't get a movers, so I had to move myself. I got those U-Haul pods. I got like a half a dozen of U-Haul pods and packed them as tight as I could, and had those delivered here. And I drove across country with my cat, and I was moving in that Thanksgiving week, and I wasn't even moved in all the way, and I'm resting. You know, Thanksgiving morning, I went down to sit down by the lake, little table we got down there, and the next door neighbor, this wonderful woman, brings me an entire Thanksgiving dinner with dessert and everything, and everything, and it's like, you know,
welcome to the Midwest.
Yeah, thank you for leaving California, Jerry. Where have you been all your life?
And did that anecdote make it into your book?
No, it didn't make it into my book, but it
Maybe the next book
made me realize this wasn't such a bad place to be. And
all right,
I can look out the window at the lake, you know, every day, and just, you know, I don't really need all those people that close to me anymore.
Yeah. I live out in the wild countryside of Canada, so I'm
there you go. I live in the wilds of Missouri.
I enjoy my space, and the second I go into the city, I'm like, I'm out.
Well, I do miss it on occasion. You miss the conveniences of, you know, a big gallery show or a big concert or something, or, you know, there are conveniences that you miss, but it's a weak trade-off.
All right, so
I can drive to Dallas in 6 hours, so 5 hours.
So Jerry, give us the 1 minute pitch for your book. Like, give us why are we going to buy your book? What are the things that are going to captivate us and grab us, and what's going to make us salivate to go and buy your book?
Well, the thing that's really going to make you salivate, which was a surprise to me, go on the Amazon page, Selling Hades Kiss, and read the reviews. I've got maybe 4 reviews on there, and with 5 stars. And the things people are saying about this book has just floored me. I love whoever they are. I love them, and I had never anticipated a reaction like that to this book. Like I said, 6 short. Very few people know what a novel in stories is, and I really didn't know what it was called while I was putting it together. I was just putting a bunch of short stories together and trying to make sense of it all, and create this world and these people. When I finally got together, I wound up, you know, somebody said it's a novel in stories, and I had to read and find out what that was. And then I went back and wrote more short stories so I could tie them together more and change elements from the stories and piece them together into the stories so that the last story reflects on the first story or the second story.
Yeah. So there's a through. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the biggest draw for me right now is the reaction people are giving to this book, and I love these people. That what it's about. Overall, I was told to come up with a log line. So here's the log line I got. New Orleans criminal psychologist Nicholas Vagel limits his work to consulting. That is, until a serial killer takes one too many, and Vagel must end the madness. Dun dun dun. But he doesn't do it alone. He shortly finds his assistant, his young Watson character, and he helps her acclimate to not only being in the United States, but she has psychological problems that he has to help her through. And it's that emotional tie that I work so hard to develop. And the way that he helps her and she helps him in return, that's what pulled the whole book together for me. And that seems to be what a lot of people are picking up on, is that emotional drive, that emotional through line through the whole book. And the last reviewer said, you know, these people came alive for her, and she was she hated putting the book down. She went back and reread portions of it just because she would miss these people.
Oh,
and so yeah,
wow,
that's my pitch.
That's gotta feel really good.
Oh, it does. I mean,
really good.
You know, if I thought about it long enough, it'd bring a tear to my eye. Well, you know, I'm working here in isolation for 3 years. You know, working on this project alone. I wasn't doing anything else. I did a couple little paintings, small paintings, but this is what I was doing every day. And I would sit here at the computer sometimes 10 hours. And I would have to force myself to get up and walk around or get on the bike and do something but like I said, it was 3 packed years of work. The last 6 months was just rewriting and re-editing and all, more than 6 months probably. And I hired a professional editor because I don't think any writer should trust himself to editing his own book. Because
you're absolutely right in doing that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's you've read it so many times.
Yeah.
Well, especially every time I finish a story and I would rewrite it maybe 5 or 6 times, just that short story. Then I would go off to the next story and work on that. But to piece it together with the previous one, I had to go back and reread and do some rewriting on that first one.
Yeah, you're moving chess pieces all over the board. Yeah,
right.
and it's a huge
I've been
chess
juggling these stories and rewriting these stories for so long and for so many times. I couldn't tell you how many times I've rewritten this book. And that was before I gave it to an editor. And still I was finding typos. So,
yeah.
You know, that's why
you'll get a copy of the book.
Yeah.
And you'll still find one.
And you'll find one right there. I do book publishing.
I bought 3 artist copies, and I found typos in every one.
Sure.
So,
absolutely, you will.
Yeah.
You will.
Well, it's a 500-page book. You're gonna do something wrong on occasion.
There are no perfect books. There just aren't.
Yeah.
There's a typo in every one of them.
Right. And also, you know how no matter how good you read, and you can re-edit however good you are at editing, you read the line or you read the paragraph as you think it reads, and you end up missing those typos because
your brain corrects it to what you wanted it to be rather than what it is. Yeah. Yep. So, but it's probably time for us to call this an end. I don't know, Martin, but before you do, pick up your book, hold it up to the camera, and say the name of it, so people can get a good look at it, know what the name of it is, and go to Amazon and pick up a copy of this book. So hold it up and say the name of it.
All right, here it is. It's called Hades Kiss. My author name is G.J. Bingham. If you're looking for me on Amazon or anywhere else, when I write, it's G.J. Bingham. I didn't want people to confuse my book, buy my book and hope there was pictures in it, because there aren't any pictures. So that's
Hades Kiss.
And so it's A Study in Darkness, Hades Kiss. Find it on Amazon, G.J. Bingham. And what else should I say about it?
I think you did it. I think you did it right.
This is my life now.
Go, folks. Go to Amazon and pick
up
Jerry Bingham's book. It looks like a great.
Also,
I'm going to check it out myself.
You can read it. You can buy it for 99 cents as an ebook if you can't afford.
Wow, you priced it
or
cheap.
If you're a Kindle member, you can read it for free. You can read a 500-page book for free if you're a member on Kindle. So that's my pitch.
Yep.
Wow.
Cool. Thank you.
There you go. Yep. Each story is different, but they're tied together because of the characters.
Yes. I actually have as I was putting this book together, after a few stories, and I realized what I was doing by picking these other different authors it's not written in their style. It has nothing to do with, but I pick up a thread or an idea or a mood from one of these authors. So the first one is a tribute to Stevenson, Robert Louis Stevenson. Then the next one is my Conan Doyle story. The first story I wrote for this. And then there's a crime story that is Westlake, and there's the Poe story. It's basically my character is Nicholas Vigel, and Vigel goes down in a plane wreck in the Atchafalaya swamp and it's his survival story. And there's some horrific elements to that story.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and then there's my noir story is after Dashiell Hammett, and there's a Chandler type story. And what else do I got here? John D. MacDonald was one. There's a Gothic modern story that's the woman by herself in the apartment building, and it's almost a haunted house story, even though there's nothing supernatural there really. But that was after du Maurier. And so there's one that's, and the last one, I kind of got the inspiration from Bram Stoker. So,
wow.
like I said, there's no real supernatural going on in there, but there's some stuff that may make people question. So I always have an explanation somewhere.
Well, 99 cents might be worth it. So, I'm intrigued.
Well,
I think I'm gonna go grab a copy myself.
I like to hold it in my hands. So
Yeah.
As these stories are so different, give yourself 3 stories. If you're not hooked by the end of the 3rd story, then you're allowed to put it down. But until then, if you want to be my friend, you'll read it.
Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, Jerry. It's great to get to know you a little bit and see where you've come from and where you're going.
I'm on here all the time, so I don't know if I've ever had you on a panel I was talking.
Yeah. No, this is the first time we've met, so this is great. So thank you for giving us some insights into your background and where you've come from and where you're going, and we're excited for you and your book.
And congratulations on all the stuff you guys are doing at Silverline. It's
well, thank you.
There's so much going on there. So much going on there, I can't keep track of it all. So to keep you informed, we are now in previews, which means that your books can be picked up in comic book stores through the comic book store or order them. So if you are a Silverline fan and you want to pick up your books in comic book stores, tell your comic book stores to order them. And the first book in previews is Trumps. That is not Trumps. This is not Donald Trump. This is Trumps the Card Game, which is a fantastic premise. Uh-huh.
And it really is.
It's very cool how Roland has taken his favorite card game and made it into a comic book. So if you know the game, you'll love the comic book because the rules of the game are the rules of the world.
To the story, yeah.
So it's all tied together, and it's very, very cool. All right, and folks, please check out Hades' Kiss by Jerry Bingham. And if you're also adventuresome, go check out his art online at his website. It's fantastic work. He has done some awesome stuff.
Thanks.
So, all right. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's do our sign off with Silverline.
My name is Ross Ritchie from Boom Studios and Make Mine Silverline.